The Marinade.
There's no O in marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade. The
That's
Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earl.
Dude, it's the light like the storm hits the wind. There's trouble in the air at night and there's blood upon your skin.
Welcome to The Marinade, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. Each episode we welcome musicians, actors, comedians, authors, visual artists, filmmakers, anyone who creates art to talk about how and why we make stuff. This is episode 151 and our guest is Jared Dustin Griffin. Jared is a singer and songwriter who has undergone an incredible journey to get to this moment. His debut solo record, Battle Cry Mercy, will be released on November 17th, 2023, and it is one of my favorite albums of a packed year. He's battled homelessness, addiction, and mental health challenges, and those themes are dealt with in a gorgeous collection of songs. Everyone, this was an absolute blast, and it is my pleasure to bring you my conversation with Jared Dustin Griffin.
Hello?
Hey, buddy.
Hey, Jason, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I got my wrong. Bear with me just a second. Sorry, bud. I got the wrong
It is
mic.
all good.
I really appreciate all your flexibility. I am got back into teaching and it's report card time, and that shit is exhausting, man.
Yeah, I have some friends that are teachers, and yeah, report card time. You parenthetically said that, and I'm like, I know what that's like. Not firsthand experience, but I have friends. I know how stressful report card time is.
It is. Yeah, it sucks, man. It's like this school is cool because they do things differently. They like instead of just like reducing kids to a number and a letter,
Yeah,
the report cards are really extensive. So we like go through different standards and we talk about whether or not they mastered those standards and all this stuff. And then we give them like, proficient or, oh, here we go.
that sounds great for the student. Way more work and stress for you.
Way more work for me. But I mean, that's why we do it, right? We do it for the kids.
For the
So
kids,
like,
exactly.
so yeah. Do I sound better now? Did that change at all?
No, you sounded great the whole time from jump.
Oh, all right, cool. Dude, thank you. I have been wearing out your record.
Awesome, man.
Just like singing its praises and wearing it out. And I'm really excited to dive into it. So thank you for making this beautiful piece of art, and thank you for your time, man.
Thank you, dude. Thank you for, man, I've been listening to your podcast. I got into your podcast, I want to say about a year ago. And
Awesome.
and I've loved it. I've been listening to it. I've spent the summer in Nashville and was listening to it. But once I knew I was going to be on, I went back and listened to a bunch of episodes. So I'm like, you researched me, I researched you. So
Oh, that means a lot to me, man. It makes a difference. It makes a difference to hear that, first of all, right? People whose art I respect are listening to the art that I'm making too. And then it just means a lot that folks who make stuff are listening, because that's part of the whole thing, right? Is that I do this to talk about process. So.
And you're such a damn good writer, man. That Marinade moment on Steve Earle was like, it might be my favorite thing you've done. And it's just because Steve Earle's also on my Mount Rushmore, and just it's such a beautiful piece of writing. And
Thank you. God, dude, you just made my day. Oh, I am so glad you said that. I wrote that piece a while ago, and so like I feel like I'm a much better writer now. But also one of the things that, and this would be a good jumping off point, one of the things that was interesting about going back and reading that piece and then reading it on mic, and then commenting on it, was I am really proud of it. And I'm grateful that you said what you said about it. But I also recognize that some of the crispness of it, some of like the imagery that's in there, some of that was the fact that I was writing a lot back then. Like a ton. And I think I'm overall a better writer now. But I'm not writing things as consistently good as that now because I'm just not writing as much. Does that make sense?
I think I'm literally going through the exact same creative output right now. Yeah, so that's pretty funny. That's how I feel with all these songs. Yeah, so I'll get into that, but these songs are all a few years old. I've already written the next 3-4 records. So so I had to go back and listen to this one a bunch over the last month and like, yeah, I'm still into these songs. I still can write this, you know.
Man, that's great. Okay, so let's talk about that then. 3 or 4 more records is a wild thing. Because this thing is awesome, dude. And I got a chance to go back and listen to, I wasn't familiar with your work really until I dove into this record. And so then I went back and listened to some of the other stuff you put out, and it's all great too. And so I'm interested in this batch of songs here. Is that the time that we're talking about, like where you were really putting out writing a lot, working a lot?
Yeah, this is some of those songs from a very productive time period, which sure there's a lot of songwriters out here that can share this sentiment. The pandemic happened, and after the first few weeks of thinking the world was ending, which we're approaching that, but it was actually kind of probably coincided with once the unemployment kicked in. I realized, okay, wow, I don't have to worry about money, don't have to worry about going to work. I've always wanted to be a paid songwriter. And so that's what I treated that time as such. And so probably starting around March, no, it started March 16th. So probably sometime mid-April, when unemployment kicked in. I started, waking up every morning, writing, going get coffee, and I treated it Monday through Friday as a job. And I did that all summer, and it stayed pretty consistently on through all of 2021 as well.
I love that so much. Because I think, that's the key right there, right? Is having the at least relative financial security of like, being just knowing you're not, if you know you're going to be able to eat and pay your bills, hopefully. Those periods of time where I've had time and I can get up and do the work are incredibly fruitful. And for me, the pandemic, I've talked a lot about on the show about how the pandemic was really good for me creatively, that I was like getting up to write because I had time. I had the time, and I thankfully during that time, at least, was not only getting paid, but I got a raise. And so it was like, nice. Oh wait, yeah. Like I had fewer responsibilities and more money. And so I was writing a fuck ton back then because
that's the dream right there. That's the
dream.
Dream.
Right. So, but I mean, for you to get there though, and I think when you listen to these songs, what I hear is a lot of, and I'm not just saying this because the press release says it, I hear like someone who's been through some shit and who is coming out the other side better. But I'm interested in how you got to that point. So you're incredibly productive during that time, but let's back up a little bit if we can, and just sort of talk about like, what was the sort of the early moments of you recognizing that you were a creative person, and like what was going on in your life at that time?
Ooh, probably a real young age. I only kind of ever wanted to be 5 things, and the 5th one was a songwriter, and that I came to when I was probably about 16 or 17.
What were those other things?
I can just bust through them real fast. First thing was a Ghostbuster. Be a Ghostbuster, and then I wanted to be a baseball player, then a basketball player, then an actor, and then songwriter.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same for me. Maybe not Ghostbuster, but I didn't aim that high.
Yeah. I think I was a Ghostbuster for Halloween 3, 4, 5, and 6. I was obsessed.
Committed.
Yeah.
Dress for the job you want.
Yeah. And so exactly. So I think I knew I was a creative type back then. And then when music finally, and I grew up, no one in my family really plays music, but I mean, I grew up with, the Beatles and the Stones on vinyl all the time, but never as like, oh, that's part of the wallpaper of my existence. And it wasn't until 16, I heard Bob O'Reilly, not for the first time, but it just kind of like hit my brain. And all of a sudden, I saw the world in color. And then I was obsessed with the Who, and that led back to the Beatles and Stones, and then Neil Young, and I was still in high school, and then all roads kind of led to Dylan. And when I got to Dylan, it was like I'm like, I don't even know why I would pursue songwriting when I already see what I perceived as the greatest songwriter ever.
Mm-hmm.
But I just was so much emotion. Like I was crying all the time listening to Dylan and, all those guys. And then I was like, well, what am I doing in school? Like nothing that I wanted to be doing. And so basically, that's when I was like, all right, well, and I wasn't even I couldn't barely play guitar when I graduated high school. And I was like, oh, it's a pretty late start. Everyone, and the Beatles were already famous. I could write pretty good, but I didn't know what to do with all those emotions. That music I became addicted, and I haven't lost that addiction since, or the hunger. So
were those emotions something that were present and you just didn't have an outlet for, or was music drawing it out of you and like from a different place?
I think that it was already in me. And I think I saw some of that in acting, because I mean, I used to take summer acting classes, Shakespeare classes, and then just like kind of, I think when I was a sophomore in high school, I was doing like the acting exercises that I used to love doing when I got into acting. And then I just felt nothing, and I was like, oh, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I think 16-year-olds, a lot of them don't know what they're doing, but I think I spent 3 months being like, oh, I don't want to do acting anymore, I don't know what to do. And then Bob O'Reilly came on, and then my life was determined from there.
Okay, so then you're 17, 18, and you don't play guitar very well, as you said, but you kind of have this sense that like this has got to be at least a part of your life. Did you have a feeling that this has got to be like, this is ultimately my goal career wise, or did you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Immediately, I was like, I just want to be a songwriter. That's all I want to do. I want to devote my entire life to the craft of songwriting.
So where'd you go from there? That's a kind of because I think that can be a really heady thing for people when you decide to take on something like that, where in a society that doesn't necessarily always reward that or encourage people to take that route. What was the next step, and what was like your mindset?
Yeah, that's where the journey became difficult. Especially I didn't have a lot of support from family and friends, because I couldn't really play, and I totally heard what they meant. I was like, oh, maybe you should hold on to a job or something till you cut your teeth a little bit more. But I just went all in, and I'd been doing that. Like when I wanted to be a basketball player and I was like 8 years old, I used to sleep with my basketball in my bed, that sort of thing. So I started sleeping with my guitar. And yeah, that started the journey of being like a vagabond. I'm like, oh, well, Dylan went to New York when he was about this age. I'll go to New York. So I lived in New York for a year, and then I was obsessed with Don't Look Back, that documentary. I'm like, oh, I'll go to London. So I lived in London for a year. And then ultimately, I always kind of ended up back where I'm from, which I was born and raised in San Francisco, just because where it was easy for me to stay on couches and find odd jobs. But, also slept in a lot of parks. I'm like, if I need to get good, and I thought I was getting a late start, I was holding the guitar 12 hours a day, every day for those first few years. Just trying to be brave enough to play an open mic.
So, okay. And I can totally relate to part of that. That's the, wanting to be brave enough to play an open mic. It took me many, many years to get up and play my songs, but I wasn't nearly as dedicated to songwriting as you clearly were. But when you live an itinerant life like that, it's not, you don't have a chance to sit down and go get the cup of coffee and then sit down at the desk and do the work. So what did that look like for you then, like process wise then, compared to say now what it looks like?
Well, yeah, then it was wild, because and I've heard other songwriters on your podcast say that you have to write like 1,000 bad songs to get to the one. So that's what I was doing. And I was so young, I was able to kind of write those bad songs anywhere and everywhere, whether it be like on someone's couch or like parks or on the bus. I was writing so much, none of it was very good. Most of it was probably pretty bad, but the process in my 20s was write all the time, and then hopefully something would be like, oh, this is kind of better than those other 800 songs, so I'll work on this one and give it more attention.
Do you think there was something about, because I hear you say how you listen to Dylan and you go like, well, why even try? A lot of people feel that way, right? Where you hear
Yeah.
somebody like Dylan, you're like, I'm never going to get there. You hear somebody like the Beatles or the Who, and you're like, well, I'm never going to get there. Do you think there was maybe something to that being your musical education that, like, I don't know, was oppressive in some way? Because I think that I know that feeling of like, well, I read somebody's, for me, it would be somebody's music journalism, a Marissa R. Moss, for example.
Yeah.
And I think like, or Steven Dusner. And I go like, well, man, I am so far away from Steven Dusner right now. I am so far away from Marissa R. Moss. How am I ever going to get there? Was there a feeling of that at all at that time that might have, like, I don't know, contributed to the 1,000 songs not being as good as quickly as possible?
Yes, but I think the bar was set so high. I mean, I wasn't joking when I said I cried a lot. I mean, I would, I'd put on records and I would cry myself to sleep. It started like as like, oh, it's so beautiful. And then when I really went all in on wanting to be a songwriter, it was like, I'll never get to this point. I'll never reach that plateau. And so no, it was oppressive for sure, but I think it drove me. It probably led to some really bad thought patterns that I'm still dealing with today. So it was a double-edged sword for sure. I think it drove me to be better than I could have been, but unreachable, unattainable goals ultimately. And I guess what helped me was going to open mics, being like, well, look at all these other people that are going for it and they're not anywhere near this bar that I've set for myself. So if they can go for it, I can go for it.
Where, like, at what point did you finally get up and play? Like, how long did that take and what did it take to get there?
Um, Probably just a couple of years.
Okay.
And yeah, the couple of years of just holding the guitar 12 hours every day, like doing nothing but just trying to work at writing.
Wow. So for a couple of years, though, you're kind of bouncing around and playing constantly, but you still haven't gotten up to play your songs for anybody.
I played a couple of open mics.
Okay. Okay.
Definitely, I played a few, but I wasn't like a regular at any. It was, and if I was like in a random town, I'm like, oh, I'll go. No one knows me here, so it's okay if they'll never see me again, anyways, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So you end up back in San Francisco. How old are you then when you had gone to London and then to New York?
Yeah. So I guess that was probably around like 24.
Okay. So you're still incredibly young, right? So you're
Yeah.
still like very young and still trying to figure it all out. So from there, where did you go? Like you come back home, because home can be, and San Francisco is a little different, I guess, in some ways, but home can be that thing that just continues to. I have a lyric in one of my songs that's this town will suck you in, right?
Yeah,
Get
I
you.
have a love-hate relationship with it for sure. So
So how'd you keep it? How do you keep it from? How did you keep it at that time from sort of sucking you in?
I started a band. By that point, I'd been doing it for about 4 or 5 years on my own. I was like, all right, well, I'm still not great, but I'm better than I was, and I'd like to see what bringing some other people on board. And so I did that, and that was great. I grew, and I wish I had done that sooner because I think anyone that's like starting off as a songwriter, if you can get in a band, I think you'll grow exponentially faster than on your own.
Mm.
And so, yeah, that was a great period of my life. I just was growing so much, and then also saw what success could look like in a small sample size in a regional capacity. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is everything I thought it would be, and I'm going to keep doing this. And so, yeah, that just fueled the addiction.
What did that particular band look like in terms of like, where are you playing? Are you playing regular? You're touring, like you have a regional tour or anything like that? What did that
Exactly.
look like?
Yeah. We had just started off playing in the Bay Area and kind of outside of California, and then got to a point where we were touring nationally and had representation and booking and whatnot. But I mean, it was not where my heart was at. It was just a lot of like, I mean, this kind of denigrates it, but just blues rock basically, you know, and it wasn't where my heart was at. But you know, I was in my 20s, the whole band was in their 20s, all of our friends were in their 20s, everyone wanted to come out, dance, have a reason to drink. It was whiskey fueled fun for the right age group. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun. But even at its height, I wasn't really proud of the work I was putting out. I'm like, this isn't where my heart is. And so when the dust kind of settled on that, it was heartbreaking, definitely. But I was just like, oh, well, back to the drawing board. I need to like kind of find the voice that can soothe some of this existential longing. And yeah.
All right. So I'm hearing kind of a theme here in terms of what you just said was going back to the drawing board. It sounds like that seems to be, at least early on in your career, as I'm hearing it, you try to do the Dylan thing that doesn't exactly work the way you might have wanted to. You end up back home. You're writing though, you're working hard. Ultimately you start this band. You get the confidence to start the band. The band goes well, but maybe not exactly what you needed to fulfill. How do you keep going back to that drawing board? What are you drawing on to get back on the horse in those times when you kind of go through that transition?
It's a really good question. There's probably multiple answers, some healthier than others. I guess the healthiest answer is just listening to the music that inspires me. And it's kind of crazy that, you know, the music that truly resonated with me then still hits me that way. Unhealthy answer is I'm hyper competitive, and that's something I'm working on in therapy and meditation and all that stuff now. It's just part of me, and I'm accepting that, so I'm able to work on that. But back then it was, yeah. And I think it's a lot of thing. It's something that I think a lot of songwriters deal with, and I don't hear enough said on podcasts, you know. And it's like, oh, I'm going to mention that because I don't hear enough about the competition aspect of it and the resentment and all that. It's all unhealthy. It's all toxic. But I mean, I don't know how anyone chooses a life in any kind of artistic medium and not experience those emotions.
I haven't said it in a long time, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. Every time I try Mark Maron's show, every time I try to listen to it, I think, how come that motherfucker's the biggest podcaster in the world? And I'm not on that level. And I can't help it. I listen to it and I go, I don't get it. I don't understand why he's so famous. I don't understand why I'm not more famous as a result. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'll be on record right now saying it. That
I appreciate you saying that so much. I just got goosebumps with you saying that.
Because, man, I wonder how much of it is the sports thing too. Like, I grew up an athlete, and so baseball was the only thing I thought I was going to do. Like, I was definitely going to play professional baseball, duh. And then playing basketball was a backup, and then I stopped growing, and I still had these delusions, right? I still thought I was gonna keep going, and when the game went away, I didn't fill it with anything, and I filled it with alcohol, and I filled it with other destructive things. And it was much later that I found writing. And so that competitive spirit is a part of me no matter what I do. And it's a kind of a weird dichotomy, I should say, that, like, you know, art shouldn't be competitive in the sense that we're all making stuff and we all should be supporting each other, of course. And I think that's true. Like, when I look at the personnel on this record, it's full of a bunch of my friends, by the way, and who are, you know, really great folks who are always rooting for each other. But at the same time, we're all competing for airtime, right? Yeah. We're all competing for people's ears, and it's tough. There's a lot of good stuff out there. I got a shelf full of records, you know, that are good. And there's a whole bunch of people making podcasts, you know. I mean, I just shit on Mark Maron, but Joe Pug makes a hell of a show that's very similar to mine. Right. Yeah. So, like, I don't blame somebody for tuning into Joe Pug instead of tuning into me. I get it. But at the same time, I think I can hang with him. you know?
Oh,
And so,
definitely.
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it is an interesting dichotomy and an interesting way to think about art, especially as we think about trying to make a living from it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it too long, it's debilitating, right? And it's completely suffocating. And the cliche, what comparison is the thief of joy, and it's totally true. But when you're going after it, it's hard not to. I mean, there's successful archetypes, but then also what works for one person won't work for another, and vice versa. I mean, it's just, and then so, I mean, yeah, you do it until you realize, and that's why a lot of people probably give up on it as well, because
Mm.
it's so competitive. And then I guess it leads to perseverance, which, what I think most of my themes are about, but definitely this record as well. I mean, it's just funny because yeah, it seems like there's just a lot of struggles that I write about, and and early it's like, oh, whiskey, substance abuse struggles, and then heartache struggles, and I just feel like since then it's mostly about like, wow, I'm still a songwriter, but not received the validation or recognition I X-ray, which not good to want external that, but we all do, and so I feel like that's what most of my songs are about now.
Yeah, okay, that's a perfect time to jump into the record then. And I think that what you just described is one of the many things that resonates with me about this. So, I mean, it's a beautiful record, Battle Cry Mercy. It's top to bottom. As soon as I turned it on, I was like, I got to just let it play again. Like, I want to hear this another time. And I was just crazy about it from the jump. And I think that what you just described, that perseverance, that resilience is something that, has served me well, especially as I think about creativity, because there are other things that I think you age out of. I don't personally believe you age out of making stuff.
No.
And and so I think that's one of the exciting things about it is that, like, even in my 40s, I feel like, hey, I'm getting better at this. I'm getting better at this creative work, and there's still opportunity for me. There's still outlets for me. It's not like I get to the end of my baseball career and that's it. I feel like I know I'll be doing this kind of work in some capacity for the rest of my life. Right. Can you talk a little bit about that theme running through the record, that perseverance, that resilience, that, we touched on it earlier, but that dusting yourself off and getting back up?
Yeah, I think like I said, kind of to backtrack a bit, just I think anyone that chooses a life in art is going to need to develop that muscle of picking yourself up and dusting yourself off. And I mean, I'm 39, been doing it for about 20 years, and yeah, I'm just as hungry now as I was then. And I think what has kept me going on top of, yeah, the competitive psychosis, uh, and the love of music is that I've actually seen myself get better over the years. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm building to something, right? Maybe I'm fooling myself into that. I don't know, but that's how I feel. Like when all the lights are turned off and I'm with my thoughts, I'm like, I'm getting better. I need to stick with this, and I want to see how good I can get.
Mm.
So this is a snippet of, yeah, a lot of the songs I've been writing over the last few years.
When you take that many songs, being that prolific over the last few years, and you think about putting them into a piece of work that's this cohesive and that's this beautiful, like, what did that process look like? How do you go, like, these are the songs that go on this record?
It's a really good question, and I thought that might come up. So obviously, I guess with some of just the way my writing naturally ebbs and flows, mixed with some kind of luck, I suppose. The producer that I kind of linked up with, Brian Brinkerhoff, who's based out of Capitola, Santa Cruz area, I recorded about 50 songs in 2 different studio sessions, and we were just kind of going through what our favorite ones were, this and that. And we didn't agree on all of them, so he was like, I want to work on these. I'm like, all right, well, I want to work on these. And basically that's my winter of 2021 was spent just making various track listings of like 4 or 5 different albums, just mixing and matching, thinking which group of songs could go best with the other ones. And so it was kind of loose. And then I heard the rough mix back of Howlin', and I knew that I wanted that song to build. And when I heard the drumming in the where the song climaxes, it's just a light bulb went off. I kind of had a beautiful mind moment. I was like, whoa, all right. Yeah, obviously war theme, battle, struggle, perseverance. And then I just started seeing the song titles that I thought would go with it. And from there, it all just came together.
There's a little bit of war theme kind of overall, of course, right?
Yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah.
that is like, it is so interesting how much that when I first listened to it, and it's called Battle Cry Mercy. Like I probably should have picked up on that theme a lot earlier, but the first time I listened to it, it didn't hit me for whatever reason. That theme ran through it, and then I think it was probably the second time I listened to My Name Is Cannonball, and then I started really paying much more attention. And then as you look at it, I mean, even the titles, Bleed You Away, for example. And God, as I'm looking at it, dude, there's so many great songs on here.
I really appreciate that.
Dude. I've been really lucky lately too, that I've received a lot of opportunities to listen to great records, and then I've been seeking out great records as well, as I always do. And I got to say, man, that yours stands out to me among all the records I've listened to this year.
Wow. That really, you made my day with that. So.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's, there's a few kind of songs that jump out at me, and I wonder if we can just kind of lightning round sort of talk about those. And Bottle on the Stove is one. And I'm curious about the process of writing that song, if you remember the time and how it came together.
I kind of do. Yeah, it's actually funny. That's an older song, the oldest song on the album. I wrote that years ago, and basically just kind of recorded it because as I was in the studio, I was like, wow, this is all just endless downers. And that song is also a downer lyric.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, but I'm like, but I need something toe tap-ish on this record. And so I just kind of threw that, didn't even allow for like an instrumental break, so didn't think it was going to be just kind of a palate cleanser in the studio. And Brian was like, oh, this has to be on the record. And so, yeah. And then I heard, and then we talked about it, and then it came to life, and I was like, you're right, this works. And yeah, so it's just a murder ballad, but I'm basically murdering myself with substance abuse, and it fit the theme for me, at least. So yeah, and that's the next single, which is released this Friday. So
oh, awesome! I'm gonna try to turn this around tomorrow, so folks should hopefully be listening to this right before or right about the time that
the album comes on the 18th. So so no rush on that.
Cool. Well, yeah, that, and I'm just excited I'm excited to spread the word. I want people to hear.
I'm so excited to be on this podcast. I can't even tell you. This is great,
dude. You're firing me up. I really appreciate it. I skipped a question, and because we've talked a little bit about process, but we didn't get very granular. And as you were just talking about Bottle on the Stove, it made me think about, I'm curious about, especially as prolific as you've been lately in the last few years, that going to get a cup of coffee and sitting down, could you talk a little more, like on a more kind of drilling down a little more on like a mechanics level, what that looks like for you? Is it a blank page and you're writing? Like, what does it look like?
So I felt good when I read, to deflect, I guess, immediately, but to cite Jeff Tweedy, who I know you're a fan of as well, and his book, not his autobiography, but his book, How to Write One Song a Day. I read that, and I was like, wow, this is a lot of how I go about it. So
that's validating.
Yeah, well, it was very validating because I revere him. And yes, so basically just sitting with a guitar and strumming it until you strum a chord or you hum a melody that sticks with you, and then compiling endless voice memos on our phones, and then going back and hearing that, and then hearing a mumble of something or hearing like one line. It was like, oh, that's good. I'll just go down that rabbit hole. And so that's how it is on a granular level, how it looks for me. But just, but turning off all devices except for my phone for the voice memos that and all outside noise, and just sitting and just working and really getting lost in that idea until something starts to materialize.
And a few folks describe it that way. Certainly, Tweedy, I've definitely read his stuff, and I was inspired by it, especially when I read his autobiography. and tried to do some of his exercises that he talks about, you know,
Yeah.
in that book. And it was helpful for me, but it's just so different from how I write.
Yeah.
And so I think, especially since I'm not really a songwriter. I mean, I write songs, but like that's not my primary focus in my creative work, right? I do it more as just like a challenge and something I enjoy. So I'm gonna take on this as like an opportunity to try to write a little bit more like that, especially as I write album reviews and show reviews. I've done so many over the years that like I don't want to repeat myself. And I felt like I was kind of getting to a place where I was repeating myself.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think I'm going to try that kind of method, you know, in like writing in a more lyrical style with those kinds of things. Because I think that might be fruitful.
And I've heard other songwriters on this podcast talk about, it's about finding a balance, but the thing is like the balance is kind of always changing. And I have that, sports competitive mindset, but so like it's hard to like, work when you're burnt out, but I like pushing myself to the point of I'm burnt out and going a little bit further and then maybe putting it down is where I'm kind of at these days.
Oh man, that just brings up a whole nother thing that I've been really dealing with. I tweeted about it last night, which is like, I'm kind of in a place in my life right now where I'm motivated to do things. And so I'm doing a lot of things at the same time, but I always, of course, want those things to be really good. And I know me, and I know I have to take time. I just have to. Like I've always been geared that way. I got to take a day off. I got to take 2 days off sometimes to just veg out, sleep a lot, read a book. And I haven't been doing that. And it caught up with me yesterday. And I'm really glad that I caught it though, because, I think I am in one of those competitive zones right now where I just want to keep doing and doing and doing and doing. And eventually it catches up to you.
Yeah. I love that Tweety in both of his books promotes naps. And I was glad that someone said it. Like, no, I can take a nap. I'm like, Tweety does it. I want to do it.
Fuck yeah. Yeah. Hell yeah. Yeah, man. Tweety's out here doing the Lord's work, validating all of our habits. As you know, we usually end on what you're getting down on. So that is the art that has you fired up right now. What's got you fired up right now?
Oh, it's been a minute since I've gotten into anything new, but this time of year, there's definitely a handful of records that I always gravitate to wear the winter months better. Tweety's solo record Warm that came out in like 2017. That's a great winter record.
I saw him on that tour. I saw him play at in-store at Park Ave CDs, our tiny little record store here in town. And then I saw him play like a full set at the Rock Club. Oh, it was fucking awesome, man. We were just packed in there between the records watching Jeff Tweedy play.
He's so captivating. Even solo, it's
there are these moments where like he just plays he's just playing his guitar open. He's not even like, there's not even a chord involved sometimes. It's just sort of like and he makes it sound so beautiful. And sometimes the lyrics are just nonsensical, but they're not. They're so full of life, and it's just, he truly is on a different level.
I could not agree more. My reverence for him is he's on my Mount Rushmore. Joanne and Newsom, Milk Eyed Mendard is a great winter record. Ray LaMontagne, Gillian Welsh, someone who you had on the podcast recently, Bella White. Both of her records are great winter records that I've been listening to. And that
was a cool experience. She was great.
That was very cool, man. That was a great podcast.
Thank you. Well, dude, this record is great. It's also got really good friends of the Marinade. Will Payne Harrison's involved. Is this? I guess that's his photo.
That is, that's his. Yeah.
All right, so folks, check out the artwork too. Get you a physical copy. Van Plating played on it, of course. The Orange Blossom Queen, who's just my dear friend, and been on the show a couple times. Heather Little, who's like Marinade adjacent. She's never been on, but like
Harry Klein mentioned her, was singing her praises when you had him on. Yeah.
Yep. So does Stephen.
I love Heather. Yeah.
Yeah. Stephen Prigmore too. Stephen Prigmore is a big, they're buddies, and he's a big fan.
She's all over my next record too.
Oh, cool. She's great, man. I got to get her on the show.
Yeah.
So this record's beautiful. And
thank you so much. I want to also go on record saying I love your podcast, and this podcast is every bit as good as The Working Songwriter. So
Oh my goodness.
undergone,
Well,
record saying
thank
that.
you said that, not me. I have
Yeah.
so much respect for Joe and what
Someone
he
had to
does.
say
But
it.
yeah. I appreciate you, dude. This has been awesome. Thank you so
It's been
much.
great, Jason. I really appreciate it.
All right, bud. Have a great night, Jared.
You too. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man. Later. Jared Dustin Griffin, y'all. Thank you so much, Jared. Thanks all of you for listening. JaredDustinGriffin.com for all things Jared. The song you're hearing in this episode is Bottle on the Stove from his wonderful record, Battle Cry Mercy. Go get a physical copy, everybody. It is absolutely outstanding, as I have gushed about repeatedly. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, Spatable, Twitter, Blue Sky, Mastodon. All the things. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support the Marinade. Go do that now while you're listening, please. It makes a huge difference for us and costs so little of your time. If you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community. Just $2 a month, y'all. You can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life. Our show What We're Getting Down On, which is this wonderful experience I have with my great friend Peter Haroldson, where we talk about the art that has us fired up at the moment each month. Y'all, you can try a free trial of Patreon and see if you like it. No pressure. Try it for 7 days. Set a reminder on your phone in case you want to cancel, and keep going if you dig it. If you want to support the show financially, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, I totally get that. You can Venmo or PayPal us. It's just at The Marinade. All the money goes right back into the making of the show. We're planning a bunch of cool stuff. We're going to go to Orange Blossom Review with my great friend and collaborator, Jen Ross. We've got so many other things on our mind in the new year, and every little bit helps, y'all. Above all, though, just thank you so much for listening and spreading the word about the Marinade. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.